Welcome to the Storytelling Lab, where we break down the art and science of storytelling. My name is Rain Bennett. I am your host, and I'm a filmmaker and an author on a quest to understand how we can tell better stories so that we can do better work and make the world a better place. Each episode, I host one of the world's best storytellers to help you understand how to leverage storytelling to increase your sales, deepen your connections, and serve your audiences better. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode, and I hope that you love it. Pia, welcome to the Storytelling Lab.
Thanks so much for having me, Rain.
Yes, I'm excited to get into it today. I have a lot of questions to ask you. This is something that, my background is in documentary filmmaking, which is storytelling. I'm a writer as well. But when I started teaching storytelling, I really started getting into brand voice, brand narrative, branding, marketing, social media marketing, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, there's a lot of overlaps in the message that we're communicating to our people, our audience, our community. So I like to nerd out about this stuff, but I am not a professional brand guide necessarily. So I'm excited to pick your brain. The first question that I have is, this is something we do. I love that you work with smaller teams. That's kind of who I fight for as well. And I try to help steal some of the secrets from bigger brands so that a solopreneur like myself or a small business, or I work with a lot of nonprofits and organizations like that, can consider the same things that the bigger teams do and do a better job at, communicating their value to their people. So my first question is, where in the sequence of building your brand launch of us, let's take it like a launch. Where in the sequence of a launch of your product or service do you place having that conversation about what is our brand? What do we stand for? Who are we?
Yeah, great question. So I work with small service businesses in my branding agency, right? 1 to 3 person service businesses is how I describe them, which means they are selling their expertise. And I actually won't work with someone who is launching in the beginning.
Okay.
And the reason I won't is because when you are selling a service and you're selling your expertise, your brand is going to be made up of a lot of the experiences that you have working with clients. And if we have no experiences to draw from, then we're just hypothesizing and making it up. And a really good brand is going to be authentic. That word is so overused, but authentic means like it's actually what's happening, not what we think would be a cool brand. And so I need the client to have experience and stories and things that they're really good at and understand the kinds of clients they don't work well with and all of that. So I can glean and pull out what makes them so special. Mm-hmm. So the answer is anytime after you've launched the first time.
Yeah, there's a lot of different views on that, but my perspective is that it gets neglected and overlooked a lot in the interest of building the thing or all of the other details. I know a lot of businesses that like, yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. What you just said reminded me of something. So in the storytelling world, Donald Miller is kind of a big name. Mm-hmm. Okay. You're nodding your head. Building a Story brand was kind of his, big book that he wrote 10 years or so ago. And the general concept, or one of them that he has in that book, is like, you are not the hero, your customer is. But what I hear you saying is like, no, we need your stuff, your experiences, your perspective, your stories, as you said. So what's your take on that? With all due respect to him, I'm not trying to like take that apart, but what is your stance on like, is the customer always the hero and you are not?
Yes. So I read Donald Miller's book a few years ago. And it's so funny you bring that up because that was when I started to tune out a little bit because I was like, I don't think that's a fact. And quite the opposite. Especially, listen, none of this can be blanket, right? And that's one thing I hate about branding advice in general is the idea that there's a way to do it. I always reiterate that I work with small service businesses who are selling expertise because the way that you brand these kinds of businesses is very specific. And what I'm about to say would be terrible advice if you were like launching a tech startup or selling shoes or something. So don't take this like this is branding. But when it comes to buying somebody's expertise, they are absolutely the hero that is coming to help you, because you have to, when you are buying and I work with, we build badass brands. And I say that badass brands, one of the two critical characteristics is that you can charge more than the competition and still win the business. In order for me to charge more than the competition and have people still want to buy from me a done for you service, man, they got to believe that I know what I'm doing. They have to believe unequivocally that I am the solution to their problem, and they got to believe in me, and I'm the hero here. I am going to rescue them. And it doesn't mean that the client isn't also the hero. When I'm building their brand, I'm talking about, that is what it means. My clients are the hero for their brand, and I need to pump them up, because that's what's going to get them the highest ticket sales.
Couldn't agree more. Love that you landed on the idea of, like, so many people in my space, your space, and many spaces probably, to be fair, want to find that one templated solution to all problems, and it just doesn't exist. I mean, you have to do the work. But in my world, it's like the equivalent would be like, oh, every story format or structure has to be the hero's journey, right? It has to be this exact format. It's like, that makes no sense. If every story is the same exact structure and format, then every story is going to sound the same. Like, the magic of you, the storyteller, is evaporated if that's your strategy, if that's your approach. So I totally agree with that. I love the way you handled that. Now, you mentioned this other concept of, well, you might have said specificity or being specific. I had already written down this as a question for you. It's bear with me here. It's very clear to me that clarity is important to you, or that you get it. And shout out to Donald Miller. This is very big in his book as well. Specificity and clarity is very important. The fact that you said, I help 1 to 3 person branding agencies. You've also in a lot of your copy talk about scaling to 30 to 50K extra a month, right? Very clear, borders and boundaries there, which I love. So you clearly understand this concept for your people, the people that you guide, that you help, that you're the hero for, right? How important do you stress that to them, to be so specific and clear about what you're trying to accomplish, who your target customer is, et cetera, et cetera? How important is clarity?
I say it every day, right? It's, again, especially in this expertise selling game, no matter all the marketing in the world, if you're not clear, it's going to fall on deaf ears. You're not going to have, people are not going to have that aha moment of recognition, of thinking, oh, I'm that person, or, oh my God, I can think of somebody who's perfect for you. They literally won't think of you if you stay general. And it's one of the hardest things for people to do. And, call it niching, right? And a lot of people are scared to niche because they're worried they're going to leave money on the table. They're worried that they're saying no to, again, the other characteristic of a badass brand, from my definition, is that you repel as much as you attract. So I'm of the opinion that repelling is actually what makes your brand so strong, but we can have that conversation. But my point is, niching is incredibly important, but I don't think people get it right. Usually, I think they usually think, oh, I have to pick an industry and go for it. 1 to 3 person service businesses is not an industry. I've worked across so many industries. Right. It's a size of client, and it allows me to be super expert in a process and a suite of services that I can do every single time like clockwork in a very specific amount of time, and know I'm going to deliver at my highest value. So that's really where I think people should find the specificity. It's something that they can really hone in on and become expert at by doing it over and over again.
It's such a good point that the specificity of your target customer, audience, community, et cetera, is not necessarily a demographic, though so many people think it is. It's like, well, I don't just help, senior citizens, or I don't just help women, et cetera, et cetera. But it can be, it certainly can be. But I love that you landed on that. It's like, it's more like the specificity of the problem that you solve. Like you deal with 1 to 3 people, person agencies in all different verticals, all different industries. But people get caught in that trap a lot, I think, of it's the specificity is a person, not a problem. Does that make sense? I'm kind of okay.
Well, it can be a problem.
Right.
It can be a process. It can be an industry. It
Mhm.
can be a size of client. And it can be a psychographic or like a personality thing, right? So our agency, so just to be clear, right, we have like our agency, Worstofall Design. We brand 1 to 3 person service businesses, and then I have my training program where I train 1 to 3 person branding agencies how to build an agency like mine. So, but same, right? Same. Oh, there's an overlap. It's just a niche or a smaller niche within the 1 to 3 person agency space.
So you serve brands and then you also train branding agencies.
Mm-hmm.
Where
Yep.
does your heart lie within those two?
Oh, I'm all in on the training branding agencies because I realized that while we were doing awesome work, and I still do take on private clients once in a while. I just did a project a couple weeks ago
Mhm.
when they're absolutely perfect and like it's the kind of work we want to do.
Yeah.
But I generally focus on training other branding agencies how to do what I do because I know that I will then help way more small businesses because my model for my agency was, we need like 10 clients a year, 12 clients a year, not even, to make more money than we even want. So that's not a lot of people to help.
Yeah.
So
Good
I
point.
thought, if I'm going to expand my reach and impact, then really I need to be training people to do this. And then all of them are working with 10, 12 clients a year. And then it expands.
When did that little epiphany happen?
2020, when everything
Like a lot of
changed. Yeah.
like a lot
Yeah.
of transformations did.
Well, you know what happened? It was there for years. So
Yeah.
I wrote my book, Badass Your Brand.
Yeah.
The intent of the book was to teach all service businesses about branding and hopefully get clients from my agency, right? That was the idea. But what inadvertently happened was that a lot of other branding agencies, just like ours, read the book and then said, I want to learn how you did that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that was, 4 years of people asking me that. So then in 2020, when I was thinking about what my next move was, and a coach of mine asked me, what do you do better than anyone else? What is the thing you can do that nobody else can do? And I was like, I have this process. I wrote about it in a book. People are asking me about it. Nobody does this process. I was like, I have to do this. This is my thing. And if I saw somebody else trying to teach this in the world, I would be so angry. It is I made this, it's my
That's funny.
baby, and I have to go do this. And I actually deleted 10,000 people off my email list because I was like, you guys aren't my market anymore. And I was like, I'm going all in on this.
I like that idea of like I would be angry if someone else did this. That's the motivation. Like no, this is mine. How important, because you're in that sense, or in that service that you provide, you're essentially a coach. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, yeah.
How important is that
Teacher.
role? You just talked about someone coaching you, which kind of unlocked the
Mm-hmm.
door. And a lot of people struggle with that. Like, should I invest in that? Should I not? How important do you think having a coach is for progress?
I have always invested in my skill set and having consultants, coaches, programs, anything that will get me the information faster, anything that will help me level up my skills. I always looked at it as, I am investing in my future ability to make money and do whatever I want. So it is, I'm still wearing clothes I've had for 20 years, but I will spend everything on coaches and consultants because I just know, because I don't care about that stuff. And I care so much about my ability to do the things I want to do. And that just comes from learning and growing and having lots of skills. Like I love to learn new things, even if I'm not necessarily going to use it directly. I know that there's learning everywhere. If you just are
Yeah.
like, open your eyes to take it. So I'm a huge proponent.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think too many people view it as an expense and not an investment. Like if you look at other things that a house you might own or something like that, like you're constantly doing improvements and things to reinvest in it, or just cosmetic improvements, right? But then often if it's for ourselves, we're like, oh, I don't know about that. And
Crazy.
right?
It's crazy. It's just a backwards thing. I think it's maybe just society as a whole. Like we go to school and then we finish and then we
And this,
think that's it. And we're not taught the idea of being a lifelong learner. Of course, I attract a lot of lifelong learners. And
yeah,
so I'm surrounded by them. But, personally, I think it's the path to fulfillment, and also getting what you want. I have more now than I ever even was going for, and I believe it's because I've just kind of always been open to being a beginner, have a beginner's mindset.
Well, this is kind of a good point that ties back into what I see today's theme being. We mentioned it before we started recording of like, trying to help out the smaller companies, by using successful larger companies strategies and tactics. There's no high performer that I know, or whether an athlete or a musician or whatever, that doesn't have a coach of some sort.
Right.
But when we're a smaller brand, and I get it, we're counting every dollar that we have all the time. We don't have a lot of time. We're strapped for everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I get that it might be daunting to think about, oh, I got to do this urgent thing. But yeah, when you think about any like professional athlete or professional anything, to be fair, there's always somebody guiding them along the way. It's a shame that we don't view that as with as much importance as we should. Perhaps.
For me, I think it clicks for people when they think about it monetarily,
Yeah.
right? So you spend money on things that are going to give you value. And I think that there's a disconnect thinking this money, it's because it's a short-term vision, right? If I
Right.
invest this $10,000, am I going to make that $10,000 back? How quickly am I going to make it back?
Totally.
It's like, you're going to make it back for forever,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
I am still, like, everything I've learned has built on the back of the last thing that I learned. And I've taken so many different courses and programs, and some of them were better than others, but I was there to learn whatever I could. I took a program once, like about halfway through, I realized I don't actually even want to do this model that I already paid in full, whatever.
Yeah.
But I saw how she was running the program itself, and I realized I actually want to have a program like this, which is different than what she was teaching. Worth its weight in gold to see that in real time. Not what she was meant to sell me, but who cares? I was like, worth every penny, just to have realized that in here.
Absolutely. What's your, like, what led you to this? What's your background?
Well,
Start from day one.
I've always known I didn't want to work for anyone. So I
Heard
had that from very early on. The only real job I've ever had working for someone else is basically bartending.
Yeah.
And I did like real estate a little bit when I got out of college, because that seemed like it hit the right notes. Really tough in 2008 in New York City. But I knew nothing about it. So I had no context that this was a terrible idea. I learned so much from doing that, though. You better believe that the grit I got from trying to get people into apartments in New York City is
Yeah.
highly recommend.
Yeah.
But really, the business started a few years after that, because my fiance at the time, my husband now, he's a painter. You can see this is his studio as well. And he was a graphic designer because his dad said, well, how are you going to make money? So he went and got, graphic design degree, and he was freelancing, and I was just watching him, and I said, you're so talented. You're terrible at the money, the invoicing, the communication. Like, that is just not your strong suit. And I am good at that stuff. So why don't I take that all off your plate? I'll go find the clients. I'll manage everything. You just do your genius thing. And that is how we started it. And it, over time, I just learned the school of hard knocks on the job. I learned what branding was in real time by having to brand our business and then seeing the effects of it and then going, oh my God, this is the value. We're not graphic designers, we're branders. And this is 10 times more valuable.
I like that. And y'all still work together, right?
Yeah. Well, when we do the projects, we do. But actually, one of our long-term goals was that we would build a business that would give us more free time.
Yeah.
And he took that free time and went back and basically is a full-time artist. And I took everything we learned and I built this coaching program. And that's, this is what I love to do. I love to facilitate other people's achievement and help them grow. Like, it gives me a lot of joy. And I love also being able to, support him in being able to do that as well. And it's all based on something we built together. So it's our business, but really it's in support of the art as well.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I mean, most of the people that listen to the show have that if they're an entrepreneur, a lot of them are artists or, have things that they want to create and put out in the world as well, if that's not their main thing. So I think that's super valuable. And this is a little off topic maybe, but I think still could be helpful for folks, because there are many people that pursue family businesses. I've tried it and failed miserably.
It's not easy.
Right. Any
It's not
tips
easy.
for people like that? And I think Steve might be close by, so you don't have to be
Yeah,
too
yeah.
mean to him. But I mean, it is an accomplishment. It's been a long time, and I know it's not easy. So, any thoughts for
Yeah.
someone who might be venturing down that same road?
Yeah. I mean, go into it with both eyes open and both wanting to make it work,
Mhm.
and therapy. Right? Like, no question. Because therapy, our relationship was, I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing. It was hard,
Yeah.
but it was forced to get better faster because
Mm.
we were spending
Right.
so much time together, and we had to build communication skills that I don't think we would have realized we had to build for a decade
Yeah.
if we had just been seeing each other at night on the weekends. It's constant communication because we're
Yeah. Yeah.
building this business. And so we did a lot. We had a therapist that worked with us to help us figure that stuff out. And I think we're way better communicators with each other, and I am with my clients and stuff because of all that work. So
That's an interesting point, because I think, you said it would have probably taken us 10 years. Usually that crossroads happens because of some potential crisis, right? Like, it's like our communication is just, eroding. And so you're like, hey, we got to switch something up. So that's an interesting perspective, that it kind of forced you to go ahead and have those conversations that it takes many people years to get to, if they're lucky, right? Sometimes they don't have those conversations, and it goes left. But
yeah, and even giving you a reason to be working on this stuff, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't think people
mm,
go to couples therapy unless unless
ve-
there's a big problem.
very true.
We were going because it was like, we have to, like,
Yeah.
we can't be in a fight in the middle of the day when there's stuff happening.
Mm-mm.
We have to have better like tools than this. So it's on the same tip as like building skills. I was like, this is a skill we
Yeah,
have to have together.
that's
And
such a good point.
yeah, and we also did we did some big personal growth programs in this period
Mhm.
together, which was also really helpful and powerful because that also
Yeah.
gave us skills. So if anyone's like, if you are trying to work with a partner, I think you need to also be doing that work, and you both have to want to do it, or else I can't imagine it working with
Yeah.
anybody.
It totally goes beyond family, right? It's any partnership.
Yes, that's
The
true.
lessons that you're kind of doling out right now is any partnership is, clear communication, clear vision, alignment, and just would you say go in with both eyes open? I think that's such a good way to put it. Let's go back to the people that you help. So one of the issues that comes up a lot, and you talk about this a lot, is pricing. You had
Mhm.
mentioned it already in today's conversation about how you help people make a lot more money.
Mhm.
Essentially, is what you
Mhm.
said. It's not the words that you used. That's something that a lot of smaller brands or organizations struggle with, especially if they're a solopreneur or a thought leader. Or they are the product, right? They
Mhm.
are the hero, for a variety of reasons. I mean, imposter syndrome, inexperience. Most of the time, I think it's like the fear of not getting the client. So you're like, ooh, I better be, the race
Oh,
to the bottom, right? Which we all have that epiphany at some point in our service-based business lives, where we're like, "Ah, that's not the race that I want to run." But let's
and you
talk.
could actually lose the client that way, by the way.
Totally. So and I know this is a big question, but I know it's one that you spend a lot of time helping your people with. So to that person, like, where do we start? Like, to that
Yeah.
person who is really struggling with that, but they're also struggling to pay their bills. How do they get better
Mhm.
at pricing more appropriately, where they can have less projects per year, go deeper with those clients, and make more money?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. It's the $1 million question,
Isn't it?
quite literally. So I have some very specific points of view on this. Probably can tell. The first one is that I think people price wrong when they're doing it based on what they think a client will pay, changing it based on who the client is, or uh, what other people are priced at. I mean, I am like, you cannot look. None of that matters. especially when you're selling your services. The only thing that matters is what you're able to charge confidently. So while the raw service that you're giving might, you might be able to say, oh, that's got $10,000 worth of value. If you don't have the confidence in that value, then you can't sell it at that price. So what I recommend, there's two parts. What I recommend is that you figure out where you want to land on your prices by figuring out what is profitable for you. So it's not a certain price point. It's, I have this whole, I actually have something called the price to freedom calculator I give people for free. I can find that link for you if you want, where you plug in your numbers and it'll spit out what you should be charging based on how long your projects take in order to support the life and business that you have right now. So you need to know, how much does it cost for me to live? How much does my business cost? How much tax would I need on top of that? What's that final number? And then you need to be able to make that amount of money, amount of revenue in 50% of your time with clients or less. That's my math, because I think you need at least 50% of your working hours available to build your business, build your skills, work on your marketing, like your lead gen, all of those things. And I don't think anybody factors that in. So that is how I figure out what your price needs to be. And then maybe you're not at that price yet. Okay, it needs to be 10,000 and I'm charging 3 and I'm scared to charge 10. The process I recommend is that you sell, raise, and you raise often incrementally. Because when you sell something, let's say you sell something 5 times for $3,000, you have confidence that you'll sell it for $3,000 at that point. If someone came along and you said $3,000 and they said that's too much, you wouldn't be shaken because you've sold it at $3,000 quite a few times.
Yeah.
So you know what? If someone will pay $3,000, they'll pay $3,250 or even probably $3,500. No one's saying, oh, if it was $3,000, I'd buy it, but $3,250, no. So you incrementally raise it and you sell it at that. Sell it, raise it. And what we're doing here is we're getting real data in the world and we're building actual confidence. I've sold this. People buy this at 3,000. People buy this at 3,500. People buy this at 4,000. And you just go, I did this process. I started at 3,000 for a one day. 6 months later, I realized this needs to be 10,000 for me to make the money I want. And with that next 6 months, I basically just raised the price $1,000 every month. And by the summer, I was charging 10,000 for the same thing, basically. And it was because I built that confidence by selling it.
So many people try to determine their prices by these outside variables. Like you said, like what is the market charging? I do, you're a speaker too, right? You do public speaking. So I started doing that in 2018 and struggled with pricing, as like a lot of people do. But now I often help people with that same issue. And that's a very common industry where they're like, well, I don't even know what to charge when you're first starting out. Like, what do other people charge? And there's what might they pay? What size event is it? Et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, that's such a fresh take, I think, to then like not look for it externally, but internally. Like, no, where do you need to be?
Where do you need to be? I mean, I'm a fan of, listen, this is what my price needs to be for me to happily build my business. You might pay more, so I should charge you more. I feel like there's a lack of integrity in that too.
That's
and
fair.
You can't afford this, then you're not my client. Either way, like I'm clear and secure on this is my price. It makes your life so much easier. You can be so much more transparent. Our prices are on our site, like there's no back and forth about this. People reach out to me and, if they put in the email, what your price, like, I'd love to talk about this, understand your pricing. I'm like, here's the link, book a call after you look at that, like let's get through the part where let's eliminate the very uncomfortable thing that a lot of people do, which is they try to assess and they say, okay, I'll come back to you with some ideas of how much this will cost. I think you're like losing sales when you do that to somebody who has transparent pricing and is really confident about it.
I also love how you said you might land on what you need is $10,000 per whatever project. You might not be there right now, but that's at least now you know where you need to be. So you have that goal in mind. You can get there much quicker than just like, I don't know, I'll raise it
right
in 6 months or 12 months or whatever. It's like, look, it's okay for you not to be there right now. I'm not saying you have to jump from 1,000 to 10,000 today.
Don't.
Right.
Don't, because you won't have the confidence. If you jump from 1,000 to 10,000 and then you say that to the next person and they say that's too much, what are you going to do? You're going to,
Okay, okay.
oh, it's too much. Oh, and now you're going to start questioning, is it not
Yeah,
worth that? Oh,
yeah.
should I lower it? Now you feel silly because you're like, oh, I lowered it again. I'm not worth that. It's terrible for your
Mm.
confidence. That's why I don't recommend the big jump until you've built that confidence.
That's such a killer too when you start questioning yourself. I know you're big on that. I saw your TED talk about banking
Oh,
confidence. I think
thank you.
you called it. Um, and now that I'm thinking about it, now that we've kind of like revealed that, oh, it can be so detrimental to you building the thing. What other tips might you have for a client to be more confident in what they're creating, what they're charging? What we're talking about now is what they're charging, but all
Mm-hmm.
of it comes back to that, like being confident that you are the right person, being confident that you know what you're doing. I know this is a broad question, but how else can we make ourselves more confident, because that's where it starts. Like, I knew storytelling. I was a documentary filmmaker in 2017. I had the thought that like I could probably teach people this stuff, especially people who, like a documentary filmmaker, don't have a lot of money, don't have a lot of time, resources, but need to tell a story. And it took me a while to get in, to get the confidence to say, no, this is what I do, this is what I cost, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're starting out and you're lacking that confidence, what are some other tips that people can get to bank the confidence, as you say?
You got to go do it, right? Do it in the real world. I find that sometimes people, when they're first starting,
Mm-hmm.
they actually put, sometimes it's the overconfidence, right? Oh, or it's, I don't know what it is. You've never sold this before, but it's worth, the market says it's $10,000. So I'm going to charge $10,000, but I don't know what it's worth, because I'm like, listen, even if you have been doing this in corporate for 20 years, because I get people like that open.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been the CMO, right? I have so much experience, and the output might technically be worth $10,000, let's say. You're not worth $10,000 right now because you've literally never done this
Mm-hmm.
as a individual consultant for this kind of business. You've never done this. You don't have the track record, the process, you don't have the systems to be able to command that. And I'm a big proponent of that. Your systems and your method and your reliability with those processes is as much or more important into the value that somebody's getting as the actual thing that you're doing. And I think most people are not thinking about that at all. In design, a lot of people will say, well, the design is worth it. If you don't know how to manage the client, if you don't know how to communicate why you designed this the way that you did, you don't know how to explain your strategy, even if you're strategic, if you don't know how to communicate that, your design is not worth anything, because it could be, you can get good design is everywhere, it's every other part that makes it valuable. Much like art doesn't have, and I love art, I've always loved that Steve was an artist because I saw it through these eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Art never has inherent value. It's all the things around it that give it that value. And it's the same thing for us and business. Just because the design is good, it's not actually inherently valuable unless you have a business around it. So even if you've got 20 years of experience, go work with a couple of clients, build that process and system. And that's where you'll get that confidence from.
Mm. That was a great one. That was a good one.
You can see I like to get on my high horse about
I did.
this.
No, I get excited too. When I'm on the other side of this, I
Gotcha.
get excited too. I love your passion. You had said something. I think it was the subtitle of your book. This term, the impatient entrepreneur, stuck out to me
Yeah.
very much. A
Well, I'm a
deep,
New Yorker.
a deep.
Don't
I
walk slow in front of me.
I very much see. This is what's funny. Like, I'm from the South, from a very small town in the South, and like,
You got New
but
York energy.
yes, yes, which is why I
I get
vibed with
that.
it so much when I was up there. Like, I loved it, which is why I miss it terribly now. And I kind of have always navigated both worlds, to be fair.
Hmm.
But I just was fueled so much by the pulse of of the city, right? And I
Hmm.
miss that very much. What does that term mean, the impatient entrepreneur, to you?
It's inherent to who I am, but I just find that most people I'm talking to, entrepreneurs, are impatient in general, right? We just all want it as soon as possible. It means that we often are setting goals that are completely unrealistic, but which is fine. Goals can be unrealistic. You set a goal and then you learn what it actually takes and how it's always going to take longer than you thought. I mean, I have achieved every goal I think I've ever set. Never even close to how long I wanted to set it to achieve it in, right? You just got to stick with it. But for me, the reason I called the book that is because a lot of the philosophy that I teach in the book and that I train people on is like the simplification and making things easier. So simply going from, well, every client is different, and I have these conversations and I write proposals and I try to figure it out, and I try to figure out what they're worth, and then I have all these feelings about it. Push that aside. That is so much effort and work. If you're impatient, have 1 or 3 offers, have prices on them, and know exactly what they are, so that when you talk to someone, it's like, this is what I got. If you need help with this and this is a good solution, it's a yes. I don't have to sell you on it. That to me cuts the line.
And we're back to the specificity and clarity point that we were at earlier. Speaking of like kind of impatience and the mindset of an entrepreneur, you had a pretty inspirational story that I read about when you were like $40,000 in debt, and you had a pretty quick turnaround from that. Can you tell us that story and what helped manifest that transformation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I told you that I had no background in this when we started in 2011.
Mhm.
By 2013, we ended up in $40,000 of debt by doing everything that I was watching everybody else
Right.
do. So I call the default model now, right? Like the agency thing, the pitching, the
Yep.
proposals. I had 2 employees because as I wanted to grow, so I hired 2 employees. We got this studio. I needed to look like I was a bigger deal so I could charge more money. And we actually brought in $240,000 in that year when we went into $40,000 of debt. And the reason was because it was unprofitable and I just
Mm-hmm.
didn't understand profitability at that time. So what happened was we were kind of backed into a corner. We didn't have any money because we didn't have any cash, and we were maxed out on our credit cards. We had to let our employees go. We literally didn't have another choice. And we had to reevaluate everything. I'm trying to be less black and white. At the time, I was like, we have to get jobs. This is over. And my very artsy, creative thinking husband was like, no, we're great at this. We brought in a lot of money. We just didn't, it was just unprofitable. He didn't use that word, but he was like, we're great at this. We just have to find our stride. And that was when we looked at what we had been selling, and we had this little $3,000 offer that we had secretly been selling to people who didn't have the $30,000 projects. And we looked at it and we said, that takes us 1 day to do. These
Mm-hmm.
$30,000 projects take us months and months and months and 4 people. And I mean, it probably takes us, 50 days to do this when everything is included. If I spent 50 days selling a $3,000 thing, I'd have $150,000 instead of the $30,000 that I get for this 50-day project. And it was like light bulb. Oh my God, we can actually make more money in less time by selling this small thing that, by the way, I'm surrounded by people who have $3,000. Let me go sell it to them. And it was like, whoosh, it was like I was chasing. And then all of a sudden, it was so easy for people to buy because it was simple. It was clear. We'll build your entire brand and website in 2 days. We'll do this project and it'll be done at the end of the day. And it changed everything. I'm not going to say literally overnight, but over 2 months, it completely changed.
That's amazing. I love that story. That did not disappoint. I appreciate you
Oh,
answering that.
thanks. I felt pressure because you're the story guy, and I was like, oh, I'm including too many details.
Good. I was taking notes the whole time and critiquing.
Yes, you can critique me
But
after.
yeah, 4.5 out of 5. Um, you also are very clear. We've mentioned this multiple times already about the 1 to 3 person brand agencies. Is that from because that is what you were, or is there another reason, like a purpose-driven thing, but trying to help that type of person, or how did you land on that being your people?
Yeah, well, I landed on it for our agency because I realized kind of over time that our process, like no matter what the industry was, a lot of the philosophies and branding processes and the deliverables that they needed were the same as
Yeah.
long as they were a small service business. So, the websites have a lot of the same bones. They're generally the same size, right? I mean, an e-commerce site could be a lot of different things, but a small service business selling expertise, we're not going to have, a 20-page website. So
Right.
it allowed me to streamline our process. And I saw patterns in all of them. So it allowed me to just get really, really good at this particular niche of people so that I was becoming more and more expert. And then I just saw so many clients come through that the patterns were really stark. So that's why I did it for our agency. And then also fewer opinions. And I know you know this. I was like, I can't handle more than 3 people. I don't want more than 3 people in a room making decisions. We're making decisions on the spot here. So that's it. You're not allowed to have more than 3 people. For the agencies, it's because I'm training something that I have done, and I've done it for a long time, and I know it like the back of my hand. And this model works so beautifully with that specific size agency, and it just allowed me to go an inch wide and a mile deep, because it's really a niche within a niche. It's a very specific kind of agency with a very lifestyle focused value system, right? My clients are not trying to build $1 million businesses. Some of them end up going in that direction, but their goal is really, I want to do my craft. I want to do it really well. I want to deliver high value, and I don't want to work all the time. And I also want to be an artist. I also want to spend time with my kids. Like, it is a big lifestyle balance conversation every day inside our community.
Speaking of too many perspectives designed by committee.
Yes.
One of the questions that I had that I wanted to ask you was, how do you tactfully handle what I call a hell client? Which is they come in all kinds of shapes and sizes and forms. One is just simply having too many people in the room, but you've already squashed that, it seems like. One that I tend to deal with a lot are just people with maybe dated perspectives, kind of old school thoughts on things. So the question is, and again, I know this is very vague, but you have a good take on how to approach people like with confidence, but also like guiding them in the right way.
Yeah.
Often people just aren't sure of what to do, yet they are still very opinionated, even though they hire people
Oh yeah,
to
they
help
love it.
them. Right. So what is your approach? I mean, people have different ways of doing this. Some people are like, look, this is how I do it. If you don't want to do it, go kick rocks. But other people might be a little more tactful. What's your approach?
I think you can say kick rocks in a tactful way.
Sure.
I think more than saying it, though, it's about having a process that communicates it from the moment you start. So, I am so clear about who we work with, our approach. We build entire brands where we work with the client for only 2 days. I say that in all of my messaging on the very first fit call. And I tell them, you're hiring me because you believe, or I'll rather say, our clients hire us because they don't know what this should be, and they want me to tell them. You don't hire me to be the hands so that you can look over the shoulder and be like, I think it should be this color and I think it should be this thing. You're hiring me because you think I know better. And you shouldn't hire me if you don't think that, because I will tell you exactly what I think. And I'm going to give you the best version of this that we believe, but you got to believe that we have that answer. And so if people are scared by that, they're not a good client for us. The benefit, though, of setting it up like that is that when you get into the creative process and they may have some pushback, I am often just doubling down on that and saying, hey, remember, like, I'm doing everything for a reason. And I'm also communicating that reason throughout. So I find it's better to do things earlier that stop them from becoming bad clients.
Totally.
And a lot of this is setting up for that. So for example, we have a very specific process for showing work. And that process, I guess you could say there's storytelling in that. We connect the dots for them before we show them anything, and we remind them of their goal. We remind them of what they said. We show them things that explain all of this. We kind of tell the story in words and in visuals. And then by the time, and so we breadcrumb them to the answer. So when we show them the answer, it's like, yeah, how could it be anything else? There's no questions, because you explained literally every decision. And I find if you do that upfront work, the back end is really easy.
So good. Can we go back briefly to the act of repelling that you mentioned? I mean, we're still kind of talking about finding your ideal clients and how you handle them and manage them.
Yes.
And we did touch on it briefly, and I understand the concept, but you felt pretty strongly about that it's just as important as attracting people as repelling the right people. So can you go a little bit further and elaborate into that? Like, what does it mean to repel when you are trying to find the right clients?
Yeah. Well, I mean, probably what most people think is more what we did. So our company is called Worstofall Design. It says badass brands without the BS on the homepage, which was a lot more contrarian in 2013 or 12 when we wrote it. It's less so now, given the state of the world. But I, when I used to go, like I remember going to a chamber of commerce
Yeah.
and I spoke, and somebody like said, like, I don't think you can say that here. Like, you can't say badass. Like I was cursing on stage. So times
Oh,
have,
we were all so young and naive.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Times have really changed. So I actually was in, do you know Entrepreneur Organization, EO?
I'm not
I
sure.
was, it's one of those like Vistage programs. I was in the accelerator program, and we were going to like the millionaires event. And one of the people running it said to me, I think you need to change your pitch because I
Oh.
don't think you should say badass. And I remember because I was young and
Mm.
I remember shaking when I told her, but I said,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that is literally my brand and I'm in branding. So respectfully, I'm going to keep it. And wouldn't you know, we became friends after that. And years later, she like laughed and she would tell the story because she then started saying it
Yeah.
later because she got accustomed to it. So back to your question, repel. That was repelling. Some people are like, worst of all, I don't get it. Why aren't you best of all? I was like, you're not my client.
Yeah.
Some people came and they were like, yes, this is what I'm talking about. I would tell people, instead of saying we help you stand out, we just do. That's how you know that we will help you stand out because our brand is, unapologetically different. So that's one way to repel, is to have a really strong voice and point of view. And the other way to repel is simply to be okay with saying, you're not my client. I could work with you, but I'm going to choose not to because there's this group of people over here that I can deliver my highest value at. And so I'm not going to water that down by working with some other people over here where I'm frankly just not going to be as good at delivering value. Maybe I'll be great, but not as good as these people over here. So simply saying I don't work with these people and I do is also a way to repel.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to ask, like, how often do you find yourself having to actively repel or reject maybe someone working with you, or are you just so clear about that in your messaging that you don't often deal with that?
Well, that's what worked really well. And this is really how I learned about branding. It just worked inadvertently so
Mhm.
well that we had this very strong personality in our brand. And so I just felt it innately because people would they'd be super fans when they contacted us to work with us. And we would get people, I thought we were going to get young, cool people, and not that our clients aren't cool or young necessarily, but I got a lot of we got lawyers, we got financial planners, like we had people in much straighter industries ask us to brand them. And they would say, we can't be worst of all badass brands, but like we want what you've got. And so they were attracted to our irreverent personality because they had some of that. And then we would make them, of course, the brand that they needed that was, that stood out for their market, not just something crazy to stand out, right? So it always had to be aligned with who they should be. But I loved that they saw like a piece of themselves in our brand, and that just made them awesome clients.
Yeah, but they weren't you all, and they couldn't be.
And they shouldn't be. They
Right.
need to be them.
That's true. So, and that's exactly where I was kind of going with that. When I hear what you just said,
Mhm.
it reminds me of what I might call brand voice or narrative voice, tone of voice. Just how what a company stands for, how they communicate, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously, you don't just help people that have your tone, your style,
Right.
your brand, right? We just talked about that. So, what's the process in helping a brand find their voice? They have to have some voice, right? They came to you even though they're a law firm because they did vibe with something in that sense, but they couldn't be as bold as you are.
Mhm.
What's the process that you take them through, if anything, to help find that? Like, how should you be communicating and showing up in your space versus the firm next door?
Yeah. Well, the first step in our process when we're going to work with anybody is something called a lead product. I call
Mm,
it a lead product. Mine is called a brand shrink. So before you can hire us to actually do your full brand and website, you have to buy and go through the brand shrink process. It's about a 2-hour interview, get to know everything about the business, understand where they are, where they want to go. And then after that interview, I write up a brief telling them exactly what their opportunities are and what they should do to get where they want to go. So in that interview, I am asking lots of questions. Even if they're coming to me for a new website, I'm like, well, tell me more about, what are the problems you're dealing with? Tell me more about your favorite clients. Tell me more about, why your clients like to work with you. And I'm looking for the opportunities to take something that's already there and is already the reason that people like working with them and they're giving value. How can I take that and put it online and give it to them in a more clear and cohesive way so that they can use it in their communications and their advertising?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the process. And then once I find that, I've been doing this for so long, and I'm sure, you've had this experience. It's really hard to see the label from inside the jar.
Totally.
Is that what they say?
Yeah.
But 2 hours in, and sometimes I'll get on them and they'll be a little confusing at first because people are experts and they start telling you about, I've done all, like medical grade things. Like I've done consultants in all kinds of areas. And I'm like, oh my God, these details. Like, am I going to figure this out? By the end of the interview, I'm always like, oh, it's obviously that thing. Like it's so obvious by the time they finish telling me, because it should be obvious. It should be the thing that's right there. They just don't see it and they're not owning it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Most of your clients, it sounds like, are, and correct me if I'm wrong here, please, thought leaders, experts in their space. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Or many?
Yes. Yeah.
So I have a question. I don't know how it's going to fly, so bear with me.
Go ahead.
Things are changing in this world with AI, especially what I see, because I'm in that space too. I mean, I'm a filmmaker, but also for the past 7 years or so have been thought leader, expert, whatever, we want to call it. And there is a little bit of, I don't want to say threat, but change in that space where we're seeming to have easier, faster access to information, right? So for someone like me to tell you how to be a good storyteller, I know my thoughts on this, by the way, but you can easily use ChatGPT or something else to look up all the different storytelling structures, et cetera, et cetera. How do you see that changing the type of people that you work with, how they should possibly adapt to it? Again, I know this is a big question, not exactly what we're talking about today, but it comes up so much, and obviously I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon, if ever. What are your thoughts on that, specifically from the lens of someone who makes their money, who makes their art,
their thought leadership
off of the information that they hold?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to be ever more valuable, because what I think the threat of AI, I definitely think it's a threat to a certain group of people, and it's the people who are at the bottom of the rung. It's the people who are delivering something that ChatGPT, frankly, might be doing even better than you're doing it, because it's just execution and you're not bringing strategic thoughts to it. So, ChatGPT can write fine stories for you, but knowing what the story, where it should go or what it should focus on, or finding those nuances, like, it will never replace us, because it doesn't matter if it can write it. It matters if you have the taste and ability to see that is or isn't the best version of this story. So what experts need to do is double down on their expertise and their ability to communicate their strategic thinking, because that is, not only do we need it even more, because there's so much noise with the there's so much content being written that's so blah and not saying anything. And there's so many people reading it, letting it write their content. And I mean, I've fallen prey to this too. You read something, it pumps it out so quickly, it sounds right. If you read it again, you're like, that doesn't say anything.
Or like,
exactly.
It says a lot, but it doesn't really
say, or like, wow, it like sounded good the first time I read it, but it's kind of just giving like the most basic general advice that's just boring and not helpful. So, you're not going to be able to see that if your critical thinking lights aren't on. And I think it's a muscle that you have to be constantly working. I think you can kind of lose it if you're not using your brain. So I think it's just really important for us to stay, just like you got to exercise as you get older, because you're you're getting older, so your body needs it even more. I think we need to be exercising our brains as much as possible, because the AI is going to make it seem easy to not do it.
Absolutely. And if anything, go more human, more experience based,
Yes.
right? The things that make you
Opportunity.
specific and clear and, unique and what you offer versus anyone else. Because again,
Yes.
we keep talking about the cookie cutter templates that we've mentioned in the conversation. That's what AI can pump out, but they can't pump out like my unique perspective from growing up in coastal North Carolina that informed how I look at storytelling, right? So I think people are fearful to do that, but like that's actually the antidote.
Let me tell you a perfect story that will illustrate this, since this is
Awesome.
the storytelling podcast. Okay.
Yes.
I did this brand a couple of weeks ago, and and by the way, AI is a great tool. Like,
Yeah.
I used
Yeah.
it to write the copy, but it was like, I'm putting things in, I'm seeing word, I'm picking this sentence, that's one's not good. So it's an editor partner.
Yeah.
I gave it this long story. I just talked in for like 8 minutes of all the things about this person that I wanted it to write an about page letter from the CEO. That's what I decided was going to be their about page. And it was a great letter. I edited it and we were going with that. And then as I continued to dig a little deeper, I found out that the client actually had a much better story, which was that she had this in finance. She realized that growing up, her dad was a doctor. They had money, but they were always talking about money, and there was scarcity. And I was like, that's your why. I'm getting goosebumps even thinking about it. I was like, oh my God, that actually is much more powerful. And that's actually why. And she didn't even realize that was why. And I redid it and I put it into ChatGPT and I redid it, and it was so much better. And ChatGPT is never going to tell you that, because it doesn't know what to put in. It's just it's going to work based on what you put. So it's the input that is up to us. And that's why we need to have the critical thinking. And by the way, I saw you nodding along. Are we like totally on the same page? Is there like something that you disagree with, or
No, I think we've
add
been on the
on?
same page all day.
we're mind
Yeah.
melding.
Yeah. No, I'm over here. For those not watching the video, I'm over here giving the little poetry, snaps instead of claps, so not to
Yeah.
be too disruptive. No, I loved your perspective on everything, and when we first connected, I was like, oh yes, exactly. I mean, to me, branding and storytelling for business, absolutely a major overlap. So I was excited to have you. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I brought a gift, but I
Oh,
actually have two gifts, if you don't
oh
mind.
no, I never mind gifts
Well,
for me.
you can have the gift too. I recently put my book. I've been talking about my book, so I recently I took it back from Audible. You can still buy it on Audible, but like I took back the exclusive rights so that I could give it away. In certain situations. So I thought
Oh,
I could
yeah.
give this. It's a private feed of my book. If you're listening to a podcast, you might like to listen to audiobooks. I put it at nobsagencies.com/storytelling lab.
Oh, lovely.
So I put that up for your listeners. And then I mentioned this freedom calculator. So I don't want to mention it and then not give it
No,
to people.
this is so awesome.
Yeah. So it's
What was that link
that's
again? No BS Agency.
nobsagencies.com/storytelling lab. And then the other one is nobsagencies.com/price.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm
Yeah, I hope the
absolutely going to use it.
listeners, can glean some more
Oh,
details about what we
super
talked about.
kind of you. An early holiday present. We'll
Oh, thank
consider
you.
that. Yeah, thank you so much. By the way, before we go, because I see the link and to your audiobook, and I read a story about someone telling you not to put your face on the cover. It's got to be like this. Got to be that. Such a good idea. You knocked it out of the
Oh,
park. It's
thank you.
amazing. It's amazing. That image is just so good. And I had a coach tell me to do that in my first book, and I didn't.
To
So
put your face on the cover?
yeah, no, I didn't do it.
Oh, you didn't do
I'm happy with the
it.
cover. We
Yeah,
went through
yeah,
a lot.
yeah.
I am happy with it, but I had a similar conversation, and I was too scared to at the time, or whatever limiting
Yeah,
belief I was probably struggling with years ago.
totally.
But you're the cover, and I know you've been told this before. It's so good.
I
So I'm
so
glad you
appreciate
stood
that.
up for yourself there.
Thank you so much for saying that. And thank you so much for having me on. This was like a really fun a really fun conversation.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I appreciate you being here and say hello to Greenpoint for me.
Absolutely.
All right, talk to you soon.